being silent while I try to keep up with all the submissions. Obviously, um, the hopper is full, but feel free to keep submitting, and we'll try to scroll through everybody at the end here, as we typically do. Good morning, everybody. Top of the stream, the usual stuff. Hope everybody's had a good week in the interim. Oh, Silver, you're here. Okay, cool. We can talk. Are you there? Hello, Silver.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, no worries.
I'm on Twitch and a very loud advertisement is playing, so I'm trying to refrain from broadcasting that.
Classic. Yeah, it's survival of the fittest to get in here. Okay, so as mentioned in the stream title, and as I have been lightly alluding to in the weeks running up to this, I have a new member to introduce today, who I'm really excited about, and who I think you should be too. Silver, you want to take it away?
Hi, my name is Andrew Silver. This is my first week at Wild Blue. Been in contact with Wild Blue through various different ways, over the last like 5 or 6 years, since the beginning of Wild Blue. Really, like we're partnered. I was on Riot side and partnering with Wild Blue for various projects and things like that. I've been a pretty big fan of how the company's been able to maintain its values and its artist forward posture, with like through all of the growth that it's had over the years. And so I'm really excited to be joining the team and working with everybody here to continue to expand the people that we're working with, both as artists on our side and as clients on the entertainment side.
Um, Silver is joining us as senior art director. His pedigree is pretty intense, and I always, when we were talking about it in the run up to hire, the way I like to phrase it is there's probably, you can probably count maybe on two hands the number of people on the planet who have as much experience and specifically with so much of our core business, and outside of just having directed the creation of hundreds of pieces of Splash and Legends of Runeterra and League of Legends, and among other things, the philosophy that Silver built up about art leadership, about art production, about artist health and well-being and advancement is pretty second to none. I will be a little mushy and say that when I joined Riot at age 22, Silver was instrumental in kind of dragging me on track and teaching me how to think about some of these things, and was a huge influence. And watching his leadership of things like Splash Team and things like that had a so far lifelong influence, and certainly informed a lot of the things I think primarily unconsciously did with Wild Blue. I realized long after the fact, was like, oh, that was because of my exposure to teams that Silver was leading during that time. So extremely happy to be working with him again. And the good news for all of you is that long awaited, long alluded to second stream a week is going to be under Silver's auspices. We're still figuring out the shape of that, but there will be more Wild Blue content, and you'll be hearing and seeing a lot more of Silver. Getting if you thought I have usable opinions about art, wait till you hear it from him. So
Thanks for that intro. I've also been a huge fan and like really admiring the work that you've been doing to set up the studio and continue to help it grow. And so it's been really cool being able to see what you've been doing on the sidelines, or from the sidelines, throughout the years, and I would consider you kind of like I guess a mentor is not the right word, but like like a role model in terms of like building a company, and something that I want to be able to follow in.
Oh man, that's my brain cannot compute the compliment, but I really appreciate it. you know, that means a lot to me. So, cool. So Silver's gonna ride shotgun. We're gonna tag team portfolio reviews this week, and like I said, we're still figuring out the shape of the additional streams that he's going to be doing. Um, but yeah, look forward to that. I mean, like I said, like um, he so many people who come to this, not everybody, right, and I value the diversity of artistic output in our community, but a huge portion of our audience are people who really directly want to work on the products that Silver has at various points in his career been the top dog in. And so I think that it's a just a different tier of access to the thought process and specifics of how work is considered and viewed for those things that are a common goal for a lot of our audience. And so I'm really excited to be able to bring that to y'all than just me, who's been at the end of the whip for a long time. So cool. So our normal process here, and I'm just gonna keep sending. I'll DM you all the links to Portfolio Silver. Um, per usual this week, it's gonna be first come first serve. We're gonna talk about it. So Julio, are you still in chat with us? And if you haven't been here before, although I think you have been, I recognize the gun with the roots. So our normal set of questions for first time reviewees is where are you in sort of your art development? Are you a student? Are you a hobbyist? Are you looking to go pro? Are you a working professional? And what are your goals with the direction of your career? Where would you like to land? Do you have any dream products, any things that you're targeting that can help us tighten up or focus our critique? And then Silver, if you want to add anything to the fact finding thing, that's just our usual stable of questions.
Yeah, I mean, my first question whenever I start working with somebody is really kind of around what their goals are. So it's a great place to start.
Cool. Because there's so right now I'm a visual arts graduate student, and right now I'm trying to go pro as a 2D game artist and concept artist. Awesome. And sort of talking about the breadth of stuff here, there's a split between illustration and concept art in the portfolio. There's a couple different there's some photoreal prop stuff. There's some fantastic prop stuff that's still attempting to be grounded, and then there's some fully stylized stuff. There's also a mixture of prop, character, environment, and things like that. So aiming for the mobile space. Where do you see sort of or where do you feel like you're aiming sort of in those sub disciplines of 2D and concept, or do you have a focus that's emerged there yet? Generalist role. Okay. Some stuff I'm interested in because I also am gravitating towards this weapons project as well as the boats and stuff. Have you worked with clients before? These hammers intimate that they were done for an unpublished project. Was there an art director on the other side of this project in particular? as one of the things I wanted to talk about because this is one of the ones that has the most complete sort of vision of process, and I'm interested in whether this was self-directed or whether this is done with a director or a client. Okay, no, never. This is the first time you've shown my portfolio to one. Awesome. Okay, so I'll come back around to the Elemental Hammers thing, but that's good context. Work as a freelancer, as a photo editor. All right, not yet as getting paid to do the 2D concept stuff. So Silver, is there a particular project you want to dive in on here, or something that you want to focus on for starters?
Um, I think so. Like when we're talking about a generalist role and kind of splitting the focus between illustration and concept art, I think starting with one and then moving over to the other because they're different sets of skills, and so talking about them individually will probably be a little bit more of a constructive conversation.
That mirrors advice that we give really often on this stream, which is like you said, concept and illustration being related disciplines, sister disciplines, but not the same job, and having foundational skills that apply to each other and buttress each other. And over the length of a career, you will likely develop enough skills in one that you can perform at a certain level within the other, or you'll maybe do both jobs over the course of your career. But we often say that if the goal is to get started professionally as quickly as possible and produce a portfolio that is hireable in the most efficient amount of time, we advise picking, well, I always say pick a lane, right? And the reason for that, sort of broadly, and I think this is something that will apply to your portfolio as we talk about it, is that every portfolio, when viewed by a potential employer, is judged ultimately by its worst piece, by the lowest common denominator. Because oftentimes when you are being hired, the way I like to talk about the mindset that people who are hiring you have is they are looking for the range of possibilities that you might deliver to them on a given project. And representing the bottom, what represents the bottom of your range enters their mind as the potential outcome for the project they're going to hire you for, or the role that they're going to hire you for. And so curating a portfolio, particularly an entry-level portfolio, is heavily behooved by really aggressively cutting the bottom out of your portfolio and only showing things that you think that somebody on the other side of the equation is going to say, okay, that's an acceptable output for me. I can rely on this person to perform at this level over over the project, over the length of the employment. And so, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like it's really sound advice. The whether or not like somebody's going to be kind of working in illustration and concept art at the same time is really kind of dependent on especially like on a more junior level. um, More senior levels, you can see people like kind of spanning the gap at various different companies, but as kind of like an entry level position, unless you're working for like a very small indie studio that's trying to like have people that are wearing many hats from the get-go, uh, generally, especially the more junior artists, are going to be specialists. Like the bigger the company that you go, the more specialized you'll become. And then as the more senior that you get, the more you'll be able to kind of like hop between the two disciplines. But I definitely second the advice of as you're working to break into the industry and really kind of get your footing, is to do two things. One is to pick where you want your focus to be, whether that's illustration or concept art. Just to start doesn't mean that that's what your whole life is going to look like. But then as well, to really kind of focus on a genre or like a place that you're going to be looking to work in order to really kind of very closely understand the needs and limitations of that genre, right? Like what are the camera angles that your, characters that you're developing are going to be seen in? How do you solve visual problems of, making sure that the UI is still visible, in relation to the things that you're making, but then also considering, like where you need to put your designs and where you need to kind of like create areas of rest and so on and so forth. And so by like really kind of having an area of focus, especially in the beginning, it's also going to make hiring managers a lot more ready to, jump on board with bringing you on because you have dedicated to learning that specific craft with that specific genre. So there's that. And then on top of that, um, the one thing that or another thing that I recommend to early artists that are working to break into the industry is exactly, again, what Eli just said. 6 pieces is plenty for a portfolio to get hired.
Yep.
Like, you do not need a wall of art in order to be able to get there. I would, basically, the thing I recommend is to be putting out a new portfolio piece every 2 to 4 weeks and pruning whatever the like whatever you feel like is the weakest in your portfolio until you get to a point where you look at your portfolio and say every single piece on here is good enough to present to a hiring manager to get me hired. And at that point, then you can start leaving things on your portfolio on your workstation, with confidence that the hiring manager is going to understand. Okay, this is where you started. That's still hireable, but then as we're like moving up, toward more recent, then your skills are developing, and this is a general snapshot of what I would be hiring.
Yeah, I the minimum viable portfolio that we'll review on stream is 3 pieces, and I agree with Silver's. Six is plenty for your entry level job, and anything beyond that better can still clear that bar for this is representing the best I can do, and specifically so early on. Oftentimes, the next thing you make is going to be the best thing you've made, and kind of keep dragging that the low water mark behind it. So definitely more interested in concept art by assuming jobs opportunities listed as producing marketing illustrations as a desired ability. Yeah, I I think don't over-index on the desireds, right? Because ultimately you still would need to be able to produce those marketing illustrations to a degree that they would be publishable, right? The um, focus on the core competencies before you go for the nice to haves, and understand that the nice to haves are truly wish listing and still are subject to the same quality bar stuff. So focusing in on mobile indie style concept stuff, if I'm looking sort of off rip at this portfolio, I think you know can probably remove all the stuff that I am highlighting here as a general starting place. It's not that there aren't good things about these projects, right? It's not that they are devoid of value or things like that. It's about tightening the focus and shoring up that range that we're talking about. And this presents a, a much more focused beginning for your portfolio. And the next thing I want to do with this is also talk about overhauling your thumbnail presentation as well, which will do a lot to generate or maximize interest when somebody comes through your portfolio.
Yes. Before we get into the like presentation though, one thing that I want to like make sure is super clear is as a concept artist, the thing that you're getting hired for is your ideas as opposed to like your painting ability. Um, and what that means is that your painting ability is not really the thing that you're demonstrating in your portfolio. Your painting ability is going to be basically like imagine like a writer's ability to type, right? Like that's the painting ability, and then what the person is writing really comes down to like what the craft of concept art actually is. It's the content, it's the ideas, and it's how quickly you're able to, or I guess not quickly, in most cases quickly, but I guess more efficiently, like efficiency in how you communicate those things. Somebody should be able to look at your work and then immediately get an understanding of what is this trying to communicate, what should I then build, and then how does that inform all the things that I'm going to be doing later on in the pipeline.
And here's the image I've been defaulting to lately to describe the exact concept that you're talking about, Silver, because I'm just super into this person's hyper efficient but hyper clear um, painted communication, and also the range of the breadth of ideas on display here that all still identifiably fall within the same brief and acceptable pitches for how to accomplish this thematic. Um, the thing I always like gravitate to on this is I like on this particular one is the like incredibly simplistic, not even complete, not worried about being even complete covering of the arms and just these raw hard round strokes. So I'm like, no, I get what that is. That's layered gold arm armor all the way down, right? And like Silver was talking about, the job of being a concept artist is ultimately about being a visual communicator, because you are talking between designers who have, they might be narrative, they might be product designers, they might be any number of different types of stakeholders who are going to be using words and reference images to describe the original output they want. And then you're creating a plan for the next people in the pipeline who are going to need specifics to execute on. And the concept artist's job is to translate from the stakeholder, product, designer, whatever needs into original, meaningfully different, and efficient, continually refined ideas until you end up at the orthographic stage. Or a 3D artist can pick this up and make this exactly without ever having to ask any questions, right?
Yeah.
And it starts at this level of, here are 6 very different, loosely accomplished but clearly communicated ideas.
Yeah, what I love about this in the process is like there's no, like you said, there's no wasted effort, right? It's literally how do I use the minimal amount of effort in order to communicate very clearly the ideas at each stage, and then spend the time rendering, putting the work into, all the definition of what we end up with at the end, when we actually get to the final shots that are going to inform later in the pipeline. But as you're working through the ideas, just being really efficient. And so when we get to like, back to some of the things that Eli had mentioned about presentation, really as a concept artist, the other thing that you want to show in the way that you present your portfolio is that you understand what the job of a concept artist is. And that is, we get ideas, right? We're going to work through as many of those ideas as we need to in order to be able to get to the ideas that we want to pursue. We're going to really like create a really good image of what those ideas look like. And so in this example here of the hammers, this is actually doing a good job of showing, here's my thumbnailing process, here's the way that I kind of made those decisions, and then here's the final result of those things. Another thing that's helpful in a concept portfolio is then how you take those things and break them out into, orthographics, or into, what the coinciding VFX are going to look like, and all the other things that are going to inform the modeler, the VFX artist, the animator, and so on and so forth down the line. If you can show a number of portfolio pieces that feature good ideas and show the entire process from thumbnailing all the way through like orthographics, animation studies, and VFX studies, it's going to give a hiring manager a lot of confidence that you understand what you need to be doing and how to support a team.
Yeah. And if you've been here enough, you've seen me drag out Pumpkin Man 100 million times for this exact demonstration, which is again broad range of very loosely but efficiently communicated different executions on what is a clear theme, right? Jack-o'-lantern Halloween themed reskin of this base skin's skeleton, right? And then continual layers of refinement and recombination of elements. One of the things I emphasize really liking to see in particularly self-directed concept portfolios is I don't really like to see big logical jumps where I can't see where the end result began in your first round of sketches, and I can't trace a through line backwards through your process from start to finish. I don't want to see people pivot entirely mid process after they get to like this level and then come out the other side with something completely different. And solving one set of problems at a time, or one group of problems at a time, in order to get to this stage. And I always bring this up for this reason: is like, here's the orthographic and here's the final 3D that was made by a 3D artist at a completely different company that we never spoke to, and everything is exactly the same between them, with the one difference being they reduced the frequency of these indents in the boots for better areas of rest, so it wouldn't be so noisy when in motion, which makes a lot of sense, right? Yeah, Pumpkin Man should probably be an entire YouTube video unto itself, right? But you know, I think this is my favorite example for this reason. Is we can use this project and trace all the way back through each stage, and then see the final interaction between concept art and 3D, which shows, the first step of this shows our conversation with the stakeholders and the people who are delivering the brief, and then by the end you can see our note to the next person in line, and what the goal of this process being getting from the person who is making the ask to the person who's executing the next piece of the puzzle. And like Silver was talking about, attendant like VFX stuff and things like that is all icing on the cake. You can see this shares a color palette and a theme and everything, and it is broken down. Shout outs Forrest Immel for doing this while he was here. So he did a bunch of these Cloudburst things that were super awesome, and I still pull up all the time when I'm asking people for VFX concept.
Awesome. So the next thing, like, I guess, and the reason why when I talk about your ideas being the thing that you're being hired for, is you really want those ideas in your portfolio to be as unique as possible. A studio is going to know that they're able to have you do things that are generic, even if they're not really considering like how soul crushing that might be. But they're going to know that you can do the generic stuff if you demonstrate that you're able to really understand how to create like a hierarchy of contrast and something that creates like a unique understanding of what your subject is. And so these hammers are a good start. You're showing different ways that you're creating hammers that are unique from each other. But I think the thing to really kind of look out for is how are you creating things that feel unique compared to the other things that are out in the world, as part of different IPs and all of that.
And specifically dovetailing off of that, why I'm fixated on this project in particular is you have much bigger, broader swings taken at this level that get whittled down into a fairly generic set, right? And there are times where why I asked if this was done for a client was specifically because I can definitely see a world where a product person says, okay, they all actually need to have roughly the same form factor and communicate their elemental identity within that. That's a different brief. that's a product driven decision that may be out of your hands, and there's value in demonstrating the ability to do that. But the effect of looking at this process for me is like, damn, I really would have liked to see the shark hammer, and I was really interested in where you were going with the air hammer having the kind of cloud motif, and like these are much more interesting ideas being presented, even if, to Silver's point, they're not necessarily wholly unique from what else might exist out there. They are significantly more compelling than the generic set of hammers that we ended up with. However, like I said, there's a different sort of value in this if it had been presented as that all along. And so I'm interested in a redux of this where you kind of follow your bliss and give me shark hammer and molten hammer and
Yeah, I think another thing to think about too as a concept artist is that you want to be creative as opposed to reductive, right? So like all of these single ideas have been done before. Like all of the fire ideas are done, right? All of the ice ideas are taken. Where you find the gold and the things that are exciting to view and unique and new are the ways in which you're combining things that maybe aren't normally combined in order to create something new. I talk about this on Ratatouille, right? But the idea that you want to try to find is not this and this, it's this but this but this, right? You're creating contrast in ways that are unique and unexpected. And so, finding the hammer that is like a shark hammer, right? Then like, what are the things that you can do with a shark hammer that might be, a little unexpected? Like, are there ways in which you have like, an anvil that goes along with it, right? And that anvil feels like it's got, some kind of reef, that's connected to it. But then in the reef, there are things that are unexpected, and trying to figure out when you're creating these hammers, what are the things that what are these hammers meant to do? What's the purpose in game? What are the ways that a player is going to be using them? And then in relation to that, how do we orient that work? Yeah, nice. How do we orient that work to like really kind of, find a unique way that it interacts with the thing that you're designing?
The goat Junji Ito said shark, but it's a weird biomechanical insect, right? And that's a good but not and example in kind of a comparison space. Obviously it's not a hammer, but could you dilute this, or could you put this sort of spirit or this sort of unexpected juke into the form of the hammer? And it's not that you won't be asked to do this. It's like Silver said, is like, if you can do the much higher scope, much higher originality version of this, then we know that you can do the other parts. And another, like, I guess as long as we're talking about like weapon design, my eternal fave, Muklisnir Senpai Please Notice Me, and his sword timber stuff is just so ludicrously off the chain for this idea that we're discussing here, that I will just forever plug his stuff as like this. Almighty Atlas is literally one of my favorite pieces of design ever. It's a fucking entire tectonic plate as a sword, and like it just this is definitely gold standard stuff for me. So
yeah, I could see like God of War taking something like this and running with it,
Yeah, exactly. So don't be especially when you're doing self-directed work. Like I said, it's not that there isn't value in saying I can do the 4 elemental hammers in the mobile game style. It's just that I know that if I asked Muklis to give me the 4 elemental hammers with the brief that they had to have roughly the same form factor, he could crush that 7 different ways. And so you can overshoot the target, and it will, a canny observer and somebody looking to hire will understand that you can definitely do everything that precedes that as well.
I'll say you do a good job of like interpreting that kind of that mobile game style. Like that's something where like the execution and the way that you're presenting it from a painting side, you're nailing, right?
Yeah.
And so if like that genre of games is the thing that you are targeting heavily, then great. It really comes down to the content as opposed to like your painting ability on it. And that's where, for something like this, where you're designing a pirate ship, right? What are the things about a pirate ship that you can really kind of like lean into that might be, unexpected, right? Like, are these toy pirate ships that are going to be, like interacting, on a, like in like a very small, uh, like water arena, and that's like the kind of like new motif of the game is like how do we make these like toy pirate ships as like wacky and zany, and like in their own lane as possible. And so you have like toys as the unifying element between all of them, but then within that you can go like really nuts, right? Like this is the water, like you know like moray eel style ship, and all of the different like things that I guess not moray eel, maybe like electric eel, right? Where it's got a bunch of different ways that it interacts with electricity, and you can see the batteries plugged into the back of the ship, in like this like very cute way, that maybe like feels like a little butt or something like that, right? And then you've got this other one which is like much more focused on like a naturalistic thing, or within that unity of the toys. Now you're trying to create as much variety within that unity as you possibly can.
And yeah, and that's ways to kind of overgun this in for all the reasons that we talked about, and I agree with all of that, and I also still want to call this out as what I believe is the best project in your portfolio right now, because it shows, like Silver said, no one's actually, there's no question that you can do the actual paint application up to snuff for the type of stuff that you're talking about wanting to target. And also, there's a lot of good evidence of thematic application and how can I take the basic ship skeleton and turn it into these meaningfully different things based on like one word, one adjective changes. Like there's a lot of smart design happening here, and you can follow that impulse even harder. You can continue to break out of that even bigger. But I think that as an entry level piece, like I think this one stays in the portfolio probably for a little while until you've gotten, this might be the last thing that rotates out for me.
I would agree. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's value in this type of stuff as well. I think the character design stuff kind of, again, talking about what's the lowest common denominator you're presenting. Like there are jobs that are this, right? and again, if your goal is foot in the door ASAP, this is another effective set of pages. These weapon icon pages and the rank insignias and the item stuff are like up to snuff, for a certain type of job, or certainly at the entry level as well. And so I think that's another one that sticks around, but you can be even more selective with what you keep around, and maybe shuffle out some of the character sketches and stuff that don't quite live up to the rest of the skills that you're showing off elsewhere.
The one thing I would say for those is like to understand. So the military one, you've got kind of like a hyper stylized, the other one that you were actually just on. Yeah. You've got this like hyper stylized. It's much more kind of like made for like a younger audience, or like like a hyper casual audience. With that, generally, like when you're going to stylize for those types of things, you want to stylize consistently and consistently for the audience, right? And so the level of simplicity is here, which is good. I my recommendation on the level of simplicity is you could probably lean even further into it, right? Like instead of having the like words printed on the side of that ammo box, what's a symbol that you could put there instead that's like much more simple, or even to like how do you use a little bit more economy in the interior lines that you're putting in so that they're a little bit more readable when they get even smaller, because at the end of the day this kind of stuff is going to be seen like micro, right? Like it's going to be so small on a small phone. So that those are things to really kind of consider in terms of the economy there. And then for the faces and things like that too, because you're kind of skewing this military aesthetic into like a cuter aesthetic, you really want to kind of understand too, like how are we taking the face structure and things like that and simplifying that into the same that same level uh, kind of cuteness.
Yeah, unified, and then one of the things that I also stress is like um, one of the things that makes me react really positively, particularly to concept portfolios, is what I call like evidence of dev mindset, which is again like Silver is saying, are you designing for the fact that these are going to be smaller than your pinky nail? And a lot of the specificity in here is cool and good, but yeah, like having the full text of the ration stuff and the first aid. In fact, the ration and the first aid dressing are like great examples because as icons, because they are both identical boxes and they are only differentiated by their text and they're going to be teeny tiny, these are effectively the same thing, and they're neither of them are very effective because of it. So like, a food symbol on the ration and a first aid symbol on this, and bang, you're done. So taking that into account is like a thing that you can demonstrate really cannily in seemingly unrelated assets. Okay, I think we're going to go forward from here. But Julio, thank you so much for submitting, and definitely hope to see you again. I hope that was helpful, and we'll keep an eye out for more work in the future. Okay. These are all the examples I pulled up. All right. Paul, at last, we get to talk. You've been very patiently submitting week over week, and I really appreciate it. Are you still around in chat for us? Hello. Okay, same questions. Where are we? Hobbyist, looking to go pro, working professional, and goals, so that we can help dial in our critique. Yes, is it last time to discuss Comrade Quack? Graduated last May with a degree in game design, followed by mentorships with John Nymister. Hey, shout outs. And Lake Hurwitz. Hey, and Paul. All three people that I am personal friends with and I think are awesome. So that's a great roster. I assume this somewhere in this was probably Visual Arts Passage, because I think at least two of those are associated with VAP. So great set of people to be learning from. I'm working to be a concept artist in AAA, focusing on narrative, heavy sci-fi and fantasy. I've done a little bit of freelance work focused on the TTRPG sphere, but not enough to go full on into that. Trying to get the first full-time gig. Okay. Yeah, Visual Arts Passage is an online school for entertainment art, run by Timmy Trayvon and John English, who are great people, and they have a cool selection of people. We taught some classes there of a semester, but ultimately couldn't make it a recurring thing in our schedule because it's a pretty big time commitment. But people like John and Lake, who are very senior people, very awesomely do make it a priority and continue to teach there. So I'm very wary about how I endorse things on this stream, but I don't think you can go to Visual Arts Passage and have and come out the other side worse. I really trust the people who are behind it. So The class when we taught it was split between Nargis Jafari and Taylor Fisher on our team. So what I'm getting here is again concept artist, seemingly focused on character. There is some distinct. There are some fours in this. This is okay. This is a 3D project, which is good to know. There's a little bit of illustration, but again, we're kind of back in character land. Okay. And then the delightful Comrade Quack, which I wish was a real game and would love to play. Super fun.
This is actually this is kind of a funny idea.
I like it a lot. And I want to see the Marx, Lenin, and Stalin ducks or geese more fully realized. This is very funny to me, but I think I'd love to see like character sheets of them. It'd be super funny.
Wait, this is a real game?
Oh, it's on Steam now. All right. I'm not going to dox my Steam account, but I will go check that out later. So.
Amazing.
Shimagoma in the chat is Taylor.
Nice.
Okay, so let's talk about similar stuff, right? Concept art. So 99% of what we just said is going to apply, even though you're targeting a different. We're looking like we're targeting much more AAA fantasy stuff, which is I'm gonna be honest, is the toughest nut to crack. I think one of the most highly competed for and demanding spaces to break into, particularly as a character designer. I'm interested in your take on that, Silver.
Yeah, I mean the thing. So I always encourage people to go after what they want, like where they inevitably want to be, right? Like if you pursue something like in a really dedicated way, all of the opportunities between what you're aiming for and like where you're at are going to open up for you as well. And so I'm never going to dissuade somebody from really focusing on getting to the hardest thing. I think that's actually the fastest way to like progress. That being said, it does raise the like stakes in terms of all of the things that need to kind of be assumed, right? We talked about how as a concept artist you're getting paid for your ideas, but there is a baseline like ante that needs to be paid in order to be able to like break into a larger level studio. That and that ante is basically like incredibly proficient, if not expert at fundamentals, and all of the different things that go along with drawing and painting. One of the things that I'm like for on the whole, looking at your portfolio, I think that the biggest things to really kind of focus on are for in drawing, it's really anatomy and proportions. Some of the proportions and whatnot on characters feel very like unheroic and like heroic isn't always, or especially isn't always the goal, but for the types of characters that you're designing, you want to kind of find the ways in which you're leveraging the way that you're shaping their body, the way that you are structuring their outfits, and the silhouette breaks that you're creating that are interesting enough and descriptive enough to communicate like the character itself. You want to set the goals for like what you're trying to achieve with the character, and then make every decision as you're realizing that character toward that goal, right? If we're making Kratos, right, like what are the things about Kratos that really makes Kratos Kratos, right? It's like incredibly strong, literal Greek god, sculpted body, and in terms of posture and things like that, you want to be focusing on something that's a little bit more aggressive because he's literally, the game is called the God of War. And then with that, as you're rendering, um, one of the things that I'm noticing consistently as well is really need to focus on an understanding of form. A lot of the forms and whatnot are flattening out, and your understanding of kind of where the light source is coming from, and what that does to turn the form and to really kind of be descript in how this armor is wrapping around the body, or things like that. And your material rendering and all of that should kind of follow suit. I like what you're doing, where you're breaking out the call outs, in the top right, where like any modeler is going to be able to like understand, okay, this is bone, this is metal, and whatnot. But if you're going to try to render those things, you really need to make sure that you're rendering them, and with a clear understanding of how that material works.
Yeah, and um, I would say that like for the tier that you're targeting, or for the type of stuff that you're targeting through your work, the key phrase is like there are no shortcuts, right? The like Silver said, the mastery of anatomy and drafting and form and communicating form, both in your drawing and painting, are the price of admission to this type of work, and are the things that you will need to, as we always say on this stream, eat your vegetables, for until your plate is completely clean. And those are, like Silver said, uh, uh, what we say, master if not expert, or expert if not master. What's the direction there?
Yeah, I mean, you need to be really good at fundamentals, if not, demonstrating that they're things that you just like do in your sleep.
Yeah. um, and so I always, when I talk to people who are targeting this stuff, it's like I don't want to stop you from doing complete projects and running through other steps of the process, but the before we can even really talk about finished products here, we're going to just talk about the very fundaments of process, the very beginnings of, like Silver said, when you're a concept artist, you're getting hired for your ideas, and then also uh, again, table stakes to get through the door is the necessary fundamentals to efficiently and compellingly communicate those ideas in process. And so I think that stuff is really critical to kind of get down. I'm interested, like in the UPA project, because I always love sort of reinterpretation stuff, because you can kind of get a bead on how people are thinking through, and what are you doing with an already iconic or masterful character design, and how are you approaching sort of taking that to a different place. Imagine just just vibing through it is what you want to avoid, until that, like, it's Mitch's Valley of Suck graph, where it's extremely high effort, you must avoid the vibes approach until you hit the bounce and start going back up, and you've done all the homework and you've done all the drilling, and like Silver said, you can do the technical element in your sleep, and then you're back into vibes territory, and you can just vibe your way through it because you've put so much thoughtful effort into the tools that you bring to the communication of your ideas.
I will say, like, the one thing that you should keep making more concept work, right? Like, if concept art is your goal, like what I would say not to do is don't go back and then just like, hardcore, like, focus on fundamentals, until your brain is numb, because the problem is then your brain will be numb, right? Like you'll learn to hate art, and like it just won't be something that you will stick with. And so the thing that I always suggest here is to, like, for each project that you're working on, pick a thing that you want to try to get better at, right? So like if this it's anatomy and proportions, right? I'm going to work on a project, but at the same time that I'm doing that project, I'm going to go study something that is specifically meant to inform that project. And so if I'm working on that project for 2 weeks, I'm going to spend the mornings warming up with, let's say it's I'm working on a really heroic character design, that the character is, maybe, I don't know. Let's say they're like really kind of thin. They, might be like a charismatic rogue, but then there's like some kind of twist, right? In the mornings, like I might be focused on figure drawing for incredibly thin characters, right? Like or thin body types. I'm gonna really try to understand as I'm doing that, how does the body kind of like carry very minimal weight, and what are the things that I'm going to be trying to like transpose over from those studies into the character itself. Other things that I might be thinking of are like, the way that cloth or fabric drapes over, a figure or like a form, and then going and doing material studies, and actually like as you're doing like a still life, right? The best way to do material studies and things like that is to do a still life. But when you're doing the still life, remember that you're not trying to make a pretty picture. You're trying to download the materials and download the understanding of light into your brain. And so, really focusing on that as you're building your piece. When I first started at Riot, literally my first week, I was invited to go to a figure drawing session, um, with a guy named Keenan Lafferty,
Mm-hmm.
who was one of the two other splash artists that were there when I started. And his like when we got done with the day, there was like I had a whole like bunch of sheets of different figures that were like full on figures. They weren't really focused. I got a little bit of enjoyment of being there, and maybe like got just some reps in of like painting or drawing a figure. Um, uh, I don't know that it was like time that was particularly well spent, right? I look over at Keenan afterwards, and I see an entire like 3 sheets of armpits, and I'm looking at them I'm like, what, what's the deal? Like, why are you just drawing their armpit? It was literally like every possible angle, just drilling armpits. Um, and like, what's going on here? And he's like, oh, no, I'm working on Ari right now, and I'm having a bunch of trouble working on getting her armpit. This was Firefox Ari, and the angle and everything like that. He was just really struggling with. And so he's like, I just need to figure out how to like finish this piece. And so, like we left that night, and the next morning, by the time that I even got to the office, like he had fixed, the armpit in that painting, and it like had moved on. And I really got a clear understanding then of like how studies should actually be used and like what the purpose is. If you look at any Leyendecker book or even Muka, right? Like they've got all of these pieces, these finished pieces that you're used to seeing, but the all of this peripheral artwork and studies that go around it to inform the work and really kind of help that economy of like paint strokes or the economy of line that like Leyendecker and Muka use.
And to put this into practice here, this one character design, let's just start from the feet up and talk about all the opportunities for study and drill on it, which are like riding boots, right? Specifically, the way that spurs are attached to riding boots with pants cuffed over them, pant cuffs in general, pants that bunch at the bottom, and loose fabric pants, and how they bunch and cuff, and how they fall over a form beneath them. Chainmail hauberks under like tunics themselves, tunics that are belted. What kinds of belts? How does this wrap work? Things that are all um, constituent elements of this and this goes all the way up to cloak. How do cloaks bunch at the shoulder? How do cloaks fall over of a certain material fall over an arm in this position believably? How does it behave when it hangs? When does it actually fold like this, or does it behave like that? Things like that there are. Yeah, so say as soon as I said riding boots, I knew Taylor was gonna chime in and be like, "Hello, it's me, the expert." And then things like indigenous cultures patterns on these things and weaving and yada yada. There are 1,000 opportunities for study that exist in a single character design, and the essence of excellence in these things is um, showing if not practiced and drilled knowledge of it, a thoughtful approximation or a thoughtful execution of it rather than an intuitive one, because oftentimes the intuitive ones are visibly intuited. um, and so go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to kind of add on to this. Like, so these are all of the different things that you can study in order to be able to get a better understanding of your subject. I think it really kind of lends itself or kind of speaks to this other skill that really kind of goes unnoticed a lot with concept artists, but is a huge part of what makes a pro concept artist what they are, is your ability to learn needs to be like astronomical and voracious, right? So like you almost need to be an armchair expert in literally anything that you're going to be working on. I remember we were working on a celestial batch of characters, and very shortly after we started working on those things, Chris Campbell came back with like a very intimate knowledge of like black holes and quasars, and like everything that goes into the physics of like large scale astronomy. And with that, he was able to take that knowledge and really kind of integrate it into the pieces that he was working on. All of that really comes down to like, I'm starting a piece. What are the things that I need to go learn? You hear writers talk about this a lot too, where like they very quickly need to become an expert to be able to integrate those things meaningfully into their work. And that's a skill to really kind of start to craft on anything that you're going to be working on.
One of the things that Mitch often says is one of the great predictors of success in entertainment art, where you're going to be asked to do these things, is not merely a fascination with fantasy, but a genuine and well-fed fascination with the real world, because you are just remixing elements of reality into fantasy. And one of the things that we, like, if any of you ever interview with us, one of the questions that we ask people is like, what are your hobbies outside of art or whatever? And an answer that we don't always love is, asterisk, there are ways to deliver this that make it palatable. But like one of the things that we kind of have flagged, particularly recently, are people who answer like, I just draw and paint. I think that the people who take shit apart and or interact with reality a lot more outside of their art, and are able to bring back that specificity and that intimate knowledge into their craft. Like I said, I think that's a strong predictor of success.
I definitely agree. Like as much as possible, trying to learn principles by breaking things apart is it, right? Like, so it's the reason why I say when you're making a still life, it's really a matter of breaking down the parts of that still life to understand how form works, how like materials and what the material properties look like are, all of that. It's less about the exercise of doing it and more about the way of looking and the way of trying to understand the why of how things come together. So that's like, so we've talked about a bunch about the things that you can study for this character. Now, like the other thing, so forgive me, I'm not I've seen Nausicaa. I am not I have not seen it enough to understand who Lord Yupa is, and like what are the character aspects that we should be emphasizing. Oh, okay, yeah.
Lord Yuba is one of my favorite character archetypes, which is old man strength. Like a Master Roshi type, like unassuming sort of lumpen old man who is hyper physical and incredibly adept. And yeah, I think he's a cool guy.
Yeah, I love that. So the main things are to understand like what are the aspects of the personality that you're trying to get across in your redesign. Um, Specifically, what are the constraints, right? Like, so if we're trying to make the proportions more realistic, or if we're trying to, abstract more, or if we're trying to incorporate, some new type of sci-fi into the design, or things like that. Generally, when you're going to redesign something, you want to have a clear way in which you're trying to move it. Otherwise, it's going to be just kind of like a less intriguing version of the thing that was already created. And so, understanding what things about this guy that you're trying to lean into is going to be important.
And even when redesigning, I think it typically behooves you to identify key elements or shapes that can be easily ported into whatever you're doing with it, right? So one, something like I'm perfectly into a lot of the choices you've made here. I think that things like his gloves could have made it in, or things like the specific element of a tuft on the hat, or maybe the specific shape of the brim of his hat, right? And and there are reasons to get away from that, and there are reasons to keep it, and the trick is knowing why you are doing either one of those things. And having a strong reason to it. And I think that there is it's a fine line to walk in terms of a meaningful and significant reinterpretation, and then or throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah, the looking at the shapes too, really kind of understanding why you would choose shapes and what they communicate, right? So like old man strength is definitely something that's like very consistently apparent, even in the way in which like it's combining this like very boxy shapes, or these very boxy shapes into the design that communicates strength. Anytime you have like boxes, squares, rectangles, right angles, things like that, it creates like a sense of heft. And they're mixing that mostly with curves, right, which generally communicate like peace or benevolence or like good. And so the like conjunction of those two things means that you get strong, good character. And that's like very intuitively like understood from the first read. There's IPs and like movies or stories or things like that that'll use that to subvert your expectations. Like the character from Treasure Planet,
That's
like the evil
that's
character where they use the shapes to try to like lure you into thinking that he's a good guy and then like blow your mind later,
that's the
right?
craziest
But
fucking thing. That's exactly where my head went. I was like, oh yeah, like the
yeah,
villain from Treasure Planet.
yeah. Um, wow, that's so good a mind meld moment.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like the things that you really want to try to do is understand like how are these shapes being used in the original design, and how do you either want to amplify those things or change them in a meaningful way that's going to communicate a certain thing about the character that you're trying to show that's unique to you. Like with this the beard and the mustache, being such a like an incredibly prominent part of the design for this character. I think if you're gonna lose those things, you really want to do that with like a very mindful eye as to what you're trying to communicate with how you're manipulating those things. If this is a younger version, right? Maybe you can borrow those shapes and try to create something else that maybe then communicates um, a different way that you're gonna like the thing about his like beard and mustache is it almost makes him feel like he's constantly smiling, right? Like he's got this like giant big half moon as part of his design, and that's like kind of part of that like like can't get me down, like no matter what, I've been living my whole life like this, I'm going to continue to be the good guy that's championing the right and noble thing, like that. Finding ways to bring that into the design elsewhere just to communicate that aspect of who the character is like a really important part of redesigning.
I completely agree, and I think that the mustache thing bears repeating because I do like your portrait of him. I like the direction you went with this because I think that one of the biggest opportunities for redesign on this entire character, because the mustache is one of the most outrageously stylized things in the original, and you are trying to bring him to more grounded. That becomes a key moment of a key moment in the design for nailing all that the mustache is meant to convey through its stylization into reality. What is the real person that is a caricature of? You have to uncaricature him into the real person that conveys that idea. And so I think that there's probably I always say like turn your sixes to nines. I think there is probably a nine version of this, but I think that this is a solid six, right? Like you do keep that the kind of concept in there, like the expression under the mustache is correct. So.
I think Taylor also brings up a bunch of good points in the chat. Is really kind of focusing on that connection to Earth, and feeling almost like a character that's been brought out of his element, and in that he's like a gardener that is now kind of taking up a mantle to stand for and fight for what matters. I think those things that are kind of part of that original design in the Miyazaki, right, are things that you would want to figure out, like when this character is being stylized into this original version that we're seeing, what are the things in the design that are making an artist who's like got a propensity for stylization really kind of sharpen those shapes in that direction.
So yeah, I think it's a compelling deep dive because it's a compelling character, and it's rich ground for again demonstrating that the thing about great concept art and breaking through to that is aligning those 1,000 moments that comprise the character into a whole that is not questioned by the viewer, and that takes so much mastery and so much attendant skill and so many things that have to add up into that, and the beauty, the trick, the prestige is making it appear effortless. So but yeah, keep going, and thank you for submitting so patiently. Again, in terms of presentation of portfolio, probably nix the 3D. We all go do our 3D projects somewhere in the education piece or the hobby piece, but is it relevant to what you're trying to sell yourself as, things like that. The other thing that I'm going to suggest too is when you're going for realistic concept, render does become a pretty significant part of the question, and I think finding a reliable, repeatable method of render is going to be very important. I'm not going to push you a particular direction. There are great arguments for photo bashing, particularly if you're already doing things like pulling real material reference. There are great arguments for learning how to do it by hand, and there are great arguments for a number of other approaches. But I think that the unhappy middle is trying to fake it with the hard round brush, right? Like trying to hack your way through it with the hard round. I think as you go back and revisit and drill some of these fundamentals, I would also rethink your approach to render and try to pick a North Star, whether that's a specific working artist already or a piece or collection of pieces that evoke the vibe that you want to come out of your work, and try to not even necessarily reverse engineer, because oftentimes people have process videos or process shots up that you can learn from. But yeah, I generally do not advocate for because it creates what we call mid-tone hell in pieces, which is of just hacking it through with a 98% opacity hard round is a hard way to get material information into a piece. All righty. Thank you, Paul. think we got room for one more, and I believe that is going to be Waleed. Okay, cool. So we've reviewed the bulk of this portfolio before, and this looks like one new addition to it that we can talk about. Welcome, Paul. Thank you for your patience and persistence in submitting. Hello, Waleed, aka Smolpen. Tell me about Zyner, especially so a lot of what we talked about last time, right, was you are doing a good job of these multiple meaningful different interpretations of a thematic on a character, and a lot of your process drawing in some of the other stuff was I don't remember which one specifically I was reacting to, but there was cool process drawing in one of them, and a lot of who Peter, is this we'll try to get to you. Oh wait, no, that's not Tibble. Wait a second. So a lot of what we talked about in the last thing was about the physicality of your finish, thinking about effective stylization, which again derives from study of reality and things like, okay, for the scale of this prop, does the size of the talisman, etc., line up? How can we do better than an extruded cube for the handle, and how do we studying the actual wrappings that would go on a katana handle and things like that? Like, how can we bring the right amount of specificity and physicality and the right scale of detail and the right balance of all of these elements to finish out what are compelling sketches, right? Compelling ideas being presented, high creativity, and again that ever desirable, very meaningfully different interpretations of a theme.
I think another thing that I would jump to for the Road Dog exploration is you chose an interesting one for the final. I think that there's some really cool stuff here, but the kind of face drape really kind of kills the focal point of the piece, right? And so like the focal point ends up being the belly as opposed to the head. The problem with that though is, as like a first person shooter, the thing that people are gonna that you want the gamers to be, or the players to be aiming for is the face, right? And so when you're going to drape something over the face, you need to figure out what ways you're going to help to make that still the focal point. And generally, like, that's going to be in how you frame it. What are the other elements that you're putting around it? How are you making that an interesting thing to like really capture attention? So that right now, like with the like, very rudimentary drawing on it and having it be like mid-tone on top of other mid-tones, it really kind of fades into the background, and we lose a lot of the volume that is in some of the other designs, right? Like if we go to the second page, you can see the other designs where the head is a little bit more formed, and you've got a much clearer understanding of kind of where these things sit. Now, I do like the idea of the first one over these second two here, because of the ways in which you're incorporating the mask into the body and all of that. But just to really think about, how you're supporting that decision with, just general, like clear hierarchy read, of the different points of interest.
Yeah. These are smaller swings, but greater holes, because they are, again, they're like Silver said, the hierarchy is better executed. I think this is an awesome concept, and it just requires a lot more work to get it to read the right way, or a different decision, frankly, right? There's nothing wrong with making belly the focus, but like Silver said, the rest has to support that. So let's kind of go forward into this next design here, which is the new piece that we're looking at here. So, starting from the sketches and the sort of um, brief that is implied here. Ziner, the engineer, in this project, my goal was to make a character that uses artifacts to fight for them. I tried to make the first ideas as far separate from each other as to push the limits of the concept. Thanks for watching. Okay, cool. So we do go forward from an idea into multiple different executions of the idea. So let's try to follow process through here.
I see why we picked B, but I will say like my favorite of these by far is E. Like the Sultan, sitting on top of a giant bag of stuff carried by like I guess automaton birds is and the way that you're utilizing the shapes here and the areas of rest versus like the areas of focus or detail, just some really cool stuff going on there. I feel like I'm sad that one wasn't picked. There are some other cool designs here too. Like I think C, that kind of like alternate Junkrat style, you know, feels like it could communicate what you're trying to go for. Um, your rendition of B, I would say, is kind of struggling a little bit from the same thing that we just talked about of like you're losing your focal point without providing a meaningful like kind of replacement for it. And so it's just something to kind of be aware of.
Yeah. I think this is a good example of how different, in some cases directors or clients or whatever will lead on different paths. Because I think now that I'm remembering this, I think this was the piece of process drawing that I reacted to strongly in the last review. Was like, I was like, that one's cool as hell. So you can see that depending on like if you have a client, whoever's sitting on the other side can snap decision send you down to a different alternate reality of which concept you're pursuing. But yeah, I agree with Silver that and we struck actually part of why we're excited to have Silver here specifically was like he gave us really early feedback years ago when we were working together about like, hey, something gets lost between your drawings and your finals, and I think like it's so hard to identify all the specific things that are working and preserve them from high energy, low specificity sketch into high specificity, much more locked down final. I don't know why, but I just, for some reason, I'm like devastated by the loss of these like particular knee spikes and the structure of these boots, and then like some of the raggediness of the hat that is implied, which like in the next iteration of the one that takes this idea and then locks it down a little bit tighter, it's like we just again without an art director there to like continually render an opinion, this is what happens, is like, oh, my favorite thing went missing and it's never to return. So
can we scroll down to the final real quick? I just want to see where we ended up.
Up actually to here.